Welcome to the Phenomenal Podcast, an authentic forum where real conversations happen. I'm your host, Phen, and each episode features an unscripted chat with everyday people. Get ready for a genuine, raw discussion. Enjoy the conversation. Hey, friends, episode 26. Very cool. It's a half a year of recording podcasts and airing podcasts, and this is my first repeat guest. So I hope you feel honored, Tyler, because, I haven't had one of these yet, so that's cool.
I really did. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, first repeat guest. I had 20.
I don't have much more to say, but we can just talk more about it.
Oh, dude, you have so much to say. And that's all I really wanted to do is just catch up with you, because Ty, since the last time you were on, I forgot what episode you were, but from the last time to now, you have changed jobs. I guess you had quit the job you were in. You were unemployed for a month or so. Now you have a new job and you've moved states. So you've had a lot of life change.
Yeah, man. Aaron just turned 1,
Yeah.
so even just the difference in life between what he was doing in the world then versus doing in the world now. And then, yeah, for us, we had an incredible opportunity to move down here to Florida and start working at a new church, which is awesome and super, super wonderful. We've lived here for barely over 2 months now, and I keep telling people my Florida initiation has got to be done. It's got to be done at this point. Like I mean, 2 months to like one really, really major hurricane and one like relatively major hurricane. I don't know if locals would call it major, but I think the rest of the world would.
Right.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty about. I'm initiated. I'm good. I don't need any more. We can just continue on. But man, it has been a incredibly it's been such a good season of life.
Yeah.
It's been really tough.
Yeah.
Really, really tough, but like super, super good. Just things that I was hoping for and praying for and looking for, kind of all coming together with one move, which really has just like, like the things that you're most afraid about or afraid of, when they work out, they're hoping they will, even like not fully, just in like the important ways, it's so much more satisfying, right? Than when you just like had soft feelings about it. So it's been, even just for me, so awesome to be in a place that like I feel like this is really where the Lord has us in this season, and to do something that I love, and my family gets to be in a place where we're really loved, and it's just, in a lot of ways, really overwhelming, right? Hurricane, it's really overwhelming to look around and see what you were looking for now being what you have.
Yeah. I found that all the time when like prayer and things like that, I've been praying for something, and then like, all of a sudden, like I've stopped praying for it, and like I've obtained it, but I don't actually realize it for a long time that like prayer's been answered. And so that's something I've tried to do better about, is like taking stock of what I'm actually praying for, and then evaluating how my life is going and seeing like, oh, this is the way that God has answered these prayers. And so it's cool that you're in the midst of it all right now, but you're actively looking for those things, because it's so easy to forget about.
Yeah, it's just easy to overlook, right? This season has come from a season of desperation, right? Like it wasn't like our season before was just like sunshine and rainbows. Like I was really struggling as a new parent. I was really struggling to even know if I wanted to still be in ministry at that point. Pastoral ministry maybe is better. I didn't know if doing this was still what the Lord wanted me to do, and was
Yeah.
probably more than I've ever done in my life. If I was equipped, right? Not like prepared,
Mm.
but equipped to do
Mm-hmm.
this. Um, which I really had never, I had, and I still do question sometimes when I just feel like I could have or should have done more, but I never questioned my equipping.
Yeah.
And so to come from a season of like questioning and stepping into a season where all these things that I had like major insecurities about
Mm-hmm.
and felt real uh, uncertain or like on really poor foundation with, are just being like affirmed over and over and
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
One of my favorite former coworkers, who, I mean, she had a really similar situation to me, really similar experience that I did, and we were talking about how we didn't realize the impact of those seasons until we're in situations now that are healthy.
Yeah.
It's like my response to things. I mean, this is such a silly example, but I have a really awesome relationship with a family and their daughter wanted to be baptized, and
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to be a part of her baptism. I got to chat with her about baptism, like kind of talk her through it and answer her questions and things, and I really wanted to be a part of it. Uh, and that's always been a point of contention
Mm-hmm.
in my past employment. And so when I asked to be a part of it, I was like super nervous and like
Mm.
anxious to ask if I could be a part of this really great thing.
Yeah.
And our pastor, Kenny, his response was like, "Yeah, man, of course." And that was the
Mm.
whole response. And it like really shocked me because I was like, "Wait, this isn't
Mm.
like a much bigger conversation. You don't have to like ask me all these questions or challenge and question my
Mm-hmm.
pastoral resume or authority, things like
Mm.
that." And I called her later and was like, "Hey, I just had this experience." And she was telling me about how she's had those moments over and over and over since God led her into kind of her season that I'm in now, of just
Yeah.
where she responded to things the way she felt like she needed to based on past experience. And we are both learning that past experience is not present truth, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
just
That's
past
really good.
experience.
That's really
Um,
good.
and it's been so fun. It's been so great to like shed some of that stuff off.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, so here, like, I think it's so awesome how quickly you're shedding that. I mean, like, you've only been down there a little bit. I think everyone, most people who have worked in a church and been behind the scenes and seen like the red tape and everything, they all get burnt by it in some way because no matter how
Sure.
much it shouldn't be or whatever, it gets political and it's a business. And so, like, there's a lot of
Mhm.
things going on at play. And I let that burn me and I stayed burnt for a very long time. It was really hard for me, probably within the last year and a half, for me to shed that past when it came to corporate churches and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's good to see. I mean, you hopped from one place to another. You were questioning yourself and you're being feeling equipped, but you still walked into a calling that you were unsure about, but the Lord's providing in that, and you are accepting His provision, which is great.
Mhm.
You know, so
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's been really wild. I don't know why I question God's faithfulness as often as I do, right?
oh,
Because I get
me
into
neither.
seasons like this and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, of course, right? Of course." But then I get into a season like I was just in,
Hmm.
and I don't know, man. I mean, I would love even to know your thoughts on this because I've been thinking about it a lot. I mean, even just within student ministry, this is a really heavy topic, but I'm starting to realize how much of a connection there is between mental health and faith, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
really only in the church ever talk about
Hmm.
mental health and faith as like two parallels almost, right? Like they run together, but they don't really ever intersect. Like they might,
Hmm.
have some influence on each other, but they don't really intersect except for in specific pockets, right? Like Christian counseling or things like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm starting to realize for me, when my mental health goes straight down, the thing that I rely on the most is the first thing I question, right? And so when any other
Right.
time of my life when my mental health is solid, man, I'm like, God's got me.
Hmm.
And it's not when I, have a bad day or things like that. It's when my anxiety gets high and my mental health goes, down the drain,
Hmm.
that the thing I question the most is the thing that's worked the most for me.
Right.
And I don't know, man. That just really, I guess it's not shocking to me, but it is like deeply concerning to me
Yeah.
that is the first thing to go for me. I don't know. Like, have you had experiences with that? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So that's a good question. And like, my faith has always been one of the strongest things I've had. When I ran away, it was more because I didn't feel like God wasn't real or anything like that, or I was questioning God and His faithfulness to me. It was more just like I didn't want people to keep treating me the way that they were treating me because of my values and things like that.
Hmm.
And that was a selfish thing that I chose. And I'm not saying this to be like anything like, oh, I'm better than anybody else. But when I lost my dad, like I was 10 years old, and like it's kind of been like was one of the worst things that you can kind of experience. And then when I was 15, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer too. And so like, I thought I was going to lose everything. And by 15, have my just little brothers to look after, and there wasn't much else to do other than rely on something bigger than me. And so that's been
Hmm.
something that I've been able to carry for most of my life now, is that like when things start to go wrong, I know where to turn, because like I've gotten through so much worse. And I think there are definitely times when I start to feel depressed or anything like that. Like I have, I'm a pretty anxious person too. It is easy to, in the moment, forget that there is someone that I can rely on. And it's not even just God. It's like anybody. It's Josie. It's my friends. It's just like you just get so bogged down with the weight of what you're feeling that you can't think about anything.
Yeah.
Um, and then to speak to you, like I think there's two sides of the story of the war, fighting for your soul. Like
Hmm.
there's God, there's the light, and then there's the darkness. And so when you're vulnerable in those
Hmm.
places, how much more is the enemy fighting to pull you away? You know? So
Yeah, no, that's a really good thought. Even just that vulnerability piece, right? Of so
mhm,
much of that season was really raw, questioning my equipping and all those things. And so
yeah,
with some of that rawness and that vulnerability, I was vulnerable, right? Like that's the nature of vulnerability. You are
right,
vulnerable. And so when attack came at the place where I was vulnerable and not protecting myself because I was not
right,
shielding
right,
myself with the spirit, man, how much more effective were those attacks? And how much less
exactly,
powerful did they have to be? Because I was standing there defenseless and
right,
getting angry with God for for
yeah,
not defending me.
right,
Um, I can laugh about it now. I was certainly not laughing about it a couple months ago. Um,
yeah,
but man, it's I'm going through Psalms right now with my students down
hmm,
here. Just felt like that was what the Lord really wanted us to get into and just hear a human a human experience of who God is, right? That's so much of
Yeah.
Psalms is a human
Mhm.
saying, here's my interaction with God. Here's who I feel like God is. Here's how I'm
Mhm.
angry with God. I'm pleased with God. I don't
Yeah.
understand God, all these things. Um, and just a couple weeks ago, we we went through one of the earlier Psalms where David's, um, saying, answer me, O Lord,
Mhm.
when I call, and hear me.
Mhm.
And I'm mid, conversation with these students in Bible study about it, and that hit me so hard
Mm.
in that moment of he doesn't. I love that first part. I'm
Mhm.
all about it, and I'm
Mhm.
like, give me an answer, right? Like,
Right.
fix this, do something about
Right.
this. But he says both things, right? Answer me and hear me,
Yeah.
right? Hear me. And I feel like that hit me so significantly because all I was looking for is an answer.
Mm.
But if I like, I mean, let's take my marriage, right? When
Mhm.
I'm only half listening to Kate, which I try not to do, just to be clear, but when I do, because that does happen, um, when I do, uh, my answer is so insufficient.
Yeah.
It's so remarkably insufficient when I'm not completely listening to her,
Mhm.
not hearing what she says. And so I'm like, man, why would I ever not ask God to hear me?
Mm.
Right? Like, why not? And then a couple weeks after that, right? This is just how the Lord is working in my life.
Mhm.
He's teaching me these things retroactively, almost like, here's where you messed up, man. Here's where I was. I had the chance to go preach at a youth retreat for a church up in Gainesville. Super awesome. I mean, unbelievably
Mm.
well pastored, faithful youth group. I mean, awesome, awesome group of kids.
Mhm.
And we were going through Daniel,
Mm.
and I was like, man, I know, like, I can preach on Daniel. I'm a youth pastor. Like, Daniel's my bread and butter. Um,
Right.
but we got to the part in Daniel, past the fire and all these things,
Mhm.
and I want to come back to the fire in a minute, actually, because I thought about you during this message, and so I'm glad that we're getting to chat
Oh.
now. I want to talk about it,
Oh,
but
interesting.
um, in it, yeah, in a later passage, I think it's Daniel 10. Daniel sees this vision, and it is like crazy overwhelming to him, like so overwhelming, he passes out on the ground,
Mhm.
and an angel comes and like revives him, and does what angels do, which is tell him not to be afraid, and
Right.
then starts right starts telling him that God has heard him. Right in this moment where
Mm.
Daniel, like it says, like he can barely stand, he can barely speak. This angel's response to him in this moment is like, your father, like God has heard you. He's
Mhm.
listened to you, and like I am the answer. I am here to answer those things, to be the answer to that. And he strengthens him and he gives him all this. And it struck me in that message because again, I feel like I get to preach to myself more than I get to preach to anybody else. Mid message or mid
Yeah.
Bible study, the Lord just hits
Right.
me with something. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that was for me, and I thought I had this written out. But what really hit me in that message was if that was me, if I'm Daniel, I've just had this experience, but also I've had this life experience with the Lord and all these things that have happened to me. And an angel comes down and says, hey, God hears you, and I am an
Mhm.
answer to what you've been asking for and saying. I'm unloading on this angel. I'm giving this angel everything I've ever wanted, right? I'm Christmas listing this angel.
Yeah. Right.
And Daniel is completely silent. It literally says, like, he remains mute, or depending on your translation, he remains silent.
Mhm.
And that hit me so hard. And I was like,
Mm.
man, in this moment where he was getting everything he needed, his first thought was not, give me more.
Yeah.
It was, this is sufficient. This is sufficient. I mean, how often in my life is the Lord giving me what I needed? What He's giving me is sufficient.
Yeah.
And in those moments where I'm getting what I need, I'm like, oh, cool. All right, so it's working right now. Like we're plugged in, we're rolling. Here's everything else I want. and then I don't get that stuff, and I get
Yeah.
upset about it.
Yeah. Man, that's good.
It killed me.
That's good because I've noticed myself recently like I've something else that I've done that has helped me tremendously with my mental health and everything. One is just working out every day like that, but that's I mean it's crazy what exercise can do for you. If you don't
Yeah,
go to the
yeah.
gym, oh yeah,
I saw your before and after, man. Yeah. Listen,
yeah.
if you haven't seen it, go look at it. That was inspirational.
I told Josie after I made the video, and I was like, "What's crazy is I didn't even like try to do this. You know, I just started going to the gym." And she's like, "I know it's annoying, um, but uh, anyways, so that's one thing. But the other thing is like, I heard this passage or this message. I wrote about it. I wrote a blog post about it. It was sometime last year. I was driving home from a friend's birthday party, and I plugged my phone in to listen to some music, and I was excited for. I don't even remember what I wanted to listen to, but I was like, you know what, I'm ready to jam, all this stuff. And Apple Podcasts opened when I plugged my phone in. Apple Podcasts opened up on my CarPlay and started playing a random message from the church that Josie went to in Auburn. And I first turned it off and I was like, no, I don't want to listen to this. Like, no, turn it off. But then I was like, wait a minute, maybe God's trying to tell me something. Like, this is really weird. Like, it wasn't even like last week's sermon. It was like 6.5 months ago. Like, like I don't even, I still don't understand how it happened. But anyways, um, yeah, the message was like, take stock of who you are in terms of God and realize that you are absolutely nothing. Like in the grand scheme of things, you are nothing. Um, and thank him for that, you know? And so every
Wow.
day, almost every day now, I try to journal and I try to take stock of the fact that without God, I am literally nothing. I would not be here. I would not be who I am. I wouldn't exist if it weren't for God. Um, and I thank him for that. And I thank him for the blessings that he's giving me. I thank him for the life that I'm living now. Um, and I thank him for the promises that he has told me are coming. And I ask for them every day because he's promised me them. And it's not because I want them fast or anything like that. Honestly, it's more of for myself to remember that God has promised these things to me. And
Mm.
then I take notice. It's like, hey, like my life is so good, but you're a father who loves to give good gifts. And I know that you want to bless me, and I'm ready to receive
Mm.
those blessings. Like, please bless me more. Um,
Yeah.
and it's not like I take notice. It's like, I know that I have everything that I need and more, but I want more. And I know that you want to give me more. And that mindset, I don't know, it's really helped me in my prayer life, and it's helped me ask God to bless me because I know that he wants to. And I am acknowledging that I already have everything that I need and more.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's right or wrong, but it makes me feel better.
I mean, I think you're hitting on like a pretty key difference between like true faithful blessing and prosperity gospel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prosperity gospel being like this reciprocity between us and God of like, I'll give you this and you will bless me in abundance,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And God's like, that's not,
How it
really how
works.
this works. Like I will give you what you need. Yeah. Um, and this difference right? I mean, Paul talks about it in Philippians, right? Like being content in your circumstances
Mm-hmm.
and still serving a God who blesses in abundance. Right?
Yeah,
Like I'm content with what I have. Is what you just said, right? I am content with what I have. I have so much more than I need,
yeah,
and I'm still claimed by a God who blesses in abundance. I'm still adopted into the inheritance, which is blessing in abundance.
yeah,
And so what I'm not seeking is the blessing in abundance because I'm content in where I am, but I am still serving a God who does bless in abundance. And
yeah.
it's just a change in mindset. It's significant, but it's powerful.
Absolutely. And something else that has helped me with this was my pastor at the church we go to. He just did a four to six. I can't remember. It was 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, but it was on prayer. It was just on different prayers of the
Mm,
Bible, and one of the weeks was the prayer of Jabez, and it's like First Chronicles 4:10 is the specific prayer, but I think in 4:9 as well. I was just looking it up. Let me see. Yeah. So Jabez was more honorable than his brothers, and his mother called his name Jabez, saying, "Because I bore him in pain." So his name means pain. Um, and then it said,
mm,
Jabez called upon the Lord, upon the God of Israel, saying, "Oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my border, and that your hand might be with me, and that you would keep me from harm, so that it might not bring me pain." And God granted what he asked. Um, and like that's the only, according to my pastor, those are the only two verses that even mention Jabez ever. And like, but he had the he had the boldness to ask God. He had the boldness to say, God, like, I know what you can do, and I ask that you
mhm.
will do it. Um, and
Yeah,
so, you know,
yeah. I think that's a, I think that is a view of faith that we're afraid to talk about,
right?
right? Like we have lived so much into this like Santa God mantra, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
like he just gives gifts and he loves love and all this kind of stuff that we just see Jesus. I mean, he's just Santa now.
Mm-hmm.
He's just got his big sack of goodies and he's just passing it out freely. And yeah, like salvation is free for us because it's bought and paid for.
Yeah.
But we do, I mean, what you just said, we serve a God who can do it all, can do it all.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to be vulnerable enough to recognize what we need and what we want,
Yep.
and bold enough in that vulnerability to ask for it,
Yeah.
right? To take that to him instead of saying, all right, this is a chance for me to show the world my power, right? Like my ability to affect my kingdom, because I can
Mm-hmm.
just make this happen for myself. And man, like I'm absolutely guilty of a lot of that. Like I want my hands on
Mm-hmm.
things, right? Like I want my hands
Yeah.
on things so that I can get to the end and say like, all right, like I can kind of put my stamp on that. I can put my name on that. And the Lord
Sure.
says, man, anything that you do that's good is from me. Anything,
Yeah.
anything that I accomplish that is good, like truly good, man, that's because the Lord ordained that, blessed that. And I so desperately want to put my
Mm-hmm.
stamp on that. But if my stamp doesn't look like the Lord, like it is worthless. And those things that I think are good are
Yeah.
worthless.
Amen.
Like they are not going to stand the test of
Amen.
time. They are worthless.
Yeah.
But all right, fire. Let's talk about fire real quick. We're men. Fire's great.
Okay.
We like
Sure.
fire.
Fire. I
I like
love fire.
fire. Yeah, fire's good stuff. Until you're getting, roasted alive, like in Daniel. Um, all right,
But they
so
didn't
for
roast.
anybody
They were
watching
chilling.
that doesn't know this story in Daniel, yeah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, one of the greatest VeggieTales episodes of all time. Um, they refuse. They come in with Daniel when they're when they're captured by King Nebuchadnezzar. God blesses them with understanding and knowledge and all these things, just beyond measure, right? And so they're with Daniel in this whole thing. We separate these stories, but they're
Yep.
together.
Yep.
Nebuchadnezzar erects this giant gold statue. It's crazy. It's all these things, and he says everybody worship this, and they say no. The people that they were given kind of power over, the Chaldeans are upset about that. So they say, cool, here's the way that we get them out of like this place of power. We go tell on them. We all know that person. Let's just be clear. We all know that person. Everybody has that person
Yep.
in their life. But
Yep.
um, the crazy thing of this story, I have preached this story, I mean, a minimum of double digit times at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really, this is prideful of me, but I sat down. I was like, I know what I'm going to say in this message. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
preached this, I know it backwards and forwards.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this message. And I got about halfway through this message, and God wrecked me during
Mm.
this message because I noticed something that I have never noticed before. And he said, Tyler, that is and was you. Is and was. And
Mm.
I feel like my season and situation now is so drastically different
Mm-hmm.
that when I heard and felt him say that, that wrecked me. And this part that I had missed every time I've ever preached this, heard it preached anything,
Mm-hmm.
he heats the furnace 7 times hotter, right? Which did the
Mm-hmm.
math. It's like a fifth of the temperature of the sun or something like that. I mean, it's like, hotter
Oh
than
wow.
hot should be able to be on Earth.
Right.
And it's like between 2 and 3,000 degrees. Um, and these men he chooses to throw them in are supposed to be like his mightiest warriors. And Nebuchadnezzar is a military genius, right? Like he's a
Mm-hmm.
genius. He never loses a battle.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says, this is so hot, they're going to die before they touch it because they're going to suffocate, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
so hot, it's going to burn the air out of their lungs. That's like the physics of what would happen here. So I want them in their clothes. So their clothes will catch fire, essentially will spontaneously combust when it gets
Mm.
close enough, and so they'll feel pain before they die. Like he's
Mm-hmm.
going next level. Like he
Mm-hmm.
really, really wants them to feel this pain and suffer before they die. And to make sure that it all happens normally, he binds them, right? He ties them hand and foot.
Mm-hmm.
The mighty warriors bring them close, toss them in. They get too close, they die just from being too close to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we know the story. Nebuchadnezzar looks in and he says, "Hey, didn't we just throw three in there? I see four, and one looks like, the image of man." Um, and what I never realized until reading it through this time was they were bound. And for them to be able
Mm.
to be walking around means that in the fire they had to be unbound. And it
Mm-hmm.
says in just the verses following them leaving the furnace that there is not a mark on them, not even the smell of smoke. Their clothes aren't
Mm-hmm.
singed. I'm even just back to that, the smell of smoke, right? Everybody there would smell like that smoke. It's that big and hot of a fire.
Mm-hmm.
But they are missing one thing. There is one thing that they went into the fire with and left
Mm.
without, and it's the things that bound them, right? They were tied
Mm.
up, they were bound. And when they were put in the fire and met there with the Lord, right? I think that's the key piece, but they met the Lord
Mm-hmm.
there. The
Mm-hmm.
only thing that fell off, the only thing that was affected was the things that bound them.
Yeah.
And that crushed me because what I
Mm.
realized, man, is that I had been in the fire, which is where I was supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
we are called to be in the fire. Because if
Yeah.
I'm in the
Absolutely.
fire, I'm like these three. I've been living the life the way I'm supposed to be living.
Yeah.
But in the fire, I was choosing my bindings.
Mm.
I was choosing my bindings instead of choosing the Lord. And so
Yeah.
I'm burning in this fire and blaming God, even though the one thing he's shown me in scripture is that,
Mm-hmm.
hey, let me in and I will set you free. And now I'm in the fire
Yeah.
because I'm still fighting the world, right? I'm still in this stuff that's still like the move and the hurricanes and even just
Mm-hmm.
like how do I do ministry with a brand new thing
Mm-hmm.
and coming off of this time of being so unhealthy mentally and so unhealthy physically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm fully, absolutely, gladly even still in the fire,
Yeah.
but I'm here with the Lord now.
Yeah.
And the reason it feels so different and so much less like fire is because I'm not bound.
Yeah.
I can walk in it. I'm free in it. And man, that absolutely that just I mean knocked me flat.
Mm.
And I remembered just after later that night when I was kind of reflecting back on this message and just thanking the Lord for giving me personally that word. Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if a single student needed that, but I did. I so desperately needed that.
Yeah.
And I thought back to one of our previous conversations. I don't even think it was on this. I think it was one of the nights you came to dinner, um, where we were talking about suffering
Mm-hmm.
and how it's confusing to be a people called to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought back to that conversation, which I mean, it was a great conversation, but I haven't thought about it since then,
Mm-hmm.
and realized that I didn't understand suffering the last time you and I talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, the last time we talked about it, suffering, I could say I'm a pastor, right? I could say suffering was done because Jesus suffered and we're called to live like Jesus and he tells us we're going to suffer. I know all the right answers,
Yeah.
but I was choosing to suffer bound.
Mm-hmm.
I was choosing the bindings and I was
Mm-hmm.
putting myself in a position to continue suffering, not for Jesus, for
Yeah.
myself,
Right.
because I was too vain and I was too prideful to allow the Lord in to set me free in that. And I realized how big of a miss, how big of a failure I had been in that last conversation with you about suffering because I had so
Mm-hmm.
personally and intimately not understood what suffering really meant and how to suffer in a healthy way.
Wow. That's a big like realization and just like revelation from the Lord, you know? Like
Yeah.
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. It's oh man, like what's really funny is I actually read that passage in Daniel uh yesterday or today. Like um
Nice.
then something jumped out to me for the first time. Like I mean, I've read it so many times and heard it since I was a little because
Yeah.
like you said, Veggie Tales and everything. But before they were thrown, the thing that jumped out to me and like your thing was a new realization for me too. Like I never thought about that. Like they went in bound, they were walking around, they left without the bindings, and like the Lord set them free. But before that, what stuck out to me was that he was told like you're going to be thrown in the fire, and they said that's okay because I know the God that I serve, and He will come through for me. But even if He doesn't, He is still good. And like, wow, like who says that? Like, yeah, throw me in the fire. I know God's good. I know God's going to protect me. But even if He doesn't, it's still His will. Like, I don't think I could ever, you know. And so like,
No, man,
and the Lord was
that's,
faithful to them.
uh, yeah. I mean, it's such a good word of just how do we live? How do we live a but even if faith? Right? Like,
Yeah,
how do we live a but even if life? Because that, man, if I'm in front of him and I got this fire going behind me, and he's like, he says right before that, right? Who is your God going to save you? Who's going to save you?
mm-hmm.
And they say, well, I don't even have to answer you.
Right.
No, man, I'm like, no, you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
You're giving me a chance. Thank you. That's merciful. God's
right,
merciful. Maybe this is a God moment, right?
right.
Maybe this is a God moment, and I'll just accept this mercy. But they're like, A, I don't even have to answer you. B,
Mm-hmm.
my God can. And C, even if he doesn't,
Yeah, He's still good.
he is still good. How do we live like
I
what is
don't.
it gonna take for especially men, right? Men.
Yeah.
I feel like my wife does this so much better than I do. So much better than I do of living a but even if faith.
Mm,
And I feel like men, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I feel like men struggle so deeply to live that second part, right? A lot of us will loudly proclaim like my
mm-hmm.
God can do that, like my God can, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't either believe or live, but even if he doesn't, he's still good.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, like that's kind of horrifying, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
terrifying that
I know.
that is the
I think.
brand of men in the church.
Yeah, right. Like, and I try to I feel you so much, and I think it was easier. Not I think I know it was way easier before I was married. I don't even have kids. Like you have a kid, like, but like if something happens to me, like, ah, good for me. Like to die is gain. Like to live as Christ, to die is gain. But I'm leaving
Mhm.
Josie behind. I'm leaving my family behind. Like she relies on me. I support her. Like that's where it's hard for me. That's where the but even if is hard for me.
Yeah.
It's like,
Mm.
but even if God is so good, but even if Josie will be okay. Like, that's the hard part because I've been called to protect her and to serve her and to support her, and you for
Mhm.
Katie and for Aaron, like, and I think God
Yeah.
respects that, it's in some way, uh, but I know he needs to be bigger for me. He needs to be the but even if, like, I know that my God will come
Mm.
through.
Yeah. You know, I'm realizing even right now as we talk about it, I've never thought about this before in this perspective, but so many of us, again, I can't say this universally, there are absolutely men who live that very well. But for
Yeah, yeah.
the masses of us that don't, I'm reflecting on myself right now and realizing I have such a hard time living a but even if faith, but I have such an easy time living a but even if life. Uh, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, right.
uh,
YOLO.
but even if I sin, my God's gonna love me. Yeah, yeah. But even if I
Yeah.
mess it up, God's gonna make it right. Um, in regards to me, I'll but even if everything, everything.
Mm,
But when it comes to God,
mm-hmm.
I wanted to do it my my way.
Man.
I wanna be able to say, oh, my God can and will.
Yeah.
That's a little convicting.
Yeah. I do. Every time we talk, I walk away convicted in some way. Like, that's, uh,
Man. So how do we do that? How do we do that?
uh,
How do we turn that?
man. I mean, I'm going to think about it. So let me share something with you that I think the Lord's placed on my heart recently. Did I tell you? Maybe the last time we talked about this, I told you. Maybe if not, but it's if you heard it, it's a repeat story. If not, whatever. Um, when I was in high school, I think like sophomore year of high school. Um, we were downtown doing some homeless ministry downtown Atlanta, and like I've been praying for years, for boldness. Like that was like the prayer. I prayed every day, like every minute of the day. Like I just wanted to be really bold. I wanted to get a tattoo like across my forearm that said "Be bold." Um, and so we're downtown and doing this homeless ministry, and we're sitting in a park, and a homeless guy is like circles all us up and starts pointing at each one of us and starts like prophesying. Um, and we're like listening to him, and like, as one does when someone just starts speaking crazy proclamations about the future and things like that, and he's homeless, you're like, oh, this guy's a little crazy. But then he gets to me, and he looks me dead in the eye and says, "You're bold." Like, and I was like, oh, "What? Okay, like now you got my attention, bro. Like now you got my attention." He tells me that God's going to use me to go around and tell the churches what they're doing wrong. And I'm like, that is a wild proclamation. Like, holy cow. Um, and now like recently, and I don't know how if this relates. It could. I think it could, but like I really feel like the Lord's put on my heart over the last year, since I've started on my journey to becoming a manlier man, to be a more masculine man, and to live a authentically bold, or a boldly different lifestyle, authentic faith, boldly different. That's what we talked about last time. That was the title of the episode. Like, to help men grow in their masculinity, especially in the church, because I think
Yeah.
today that is one of the biggest issues within the church, is that there are not enough
Mm,
masculine men who are living of bold faith, authentic faith. Um, we've all just become watered down, and that
mm,
saying that like good hard times make strong men make good times make weak men, or that's it's the cycle, and we've definitely gotten to the
yeah.
point where good times make weak men and weak men make hard times. Like I just really feel like
Whoa.
the Lord's calling me in some way to do something to help the next generation of men become men. So, what does it look like?
Mm.
I don't know, but it's definitely a but even if.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, it has to be, right? Because if next generation stuff is, every generation says the generation before them ruined everything, and every generation
Mm-hmm.
before it says the generation after them is the worst. And that's just
Yeah,
kind of
right.
kind of the cycle of how we live. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but that boldness, man, hey, like what an incredible experience to to be
Yeah, right.
spoken to so directly about something that's
Yeah.
so, spirit led. But man, I'm even just thinking about that as far as like, I think watered down, I think maybe you just defined it exactly right, right? Like there are so many people
Mm-hmm.
who take offense, men and women who take offense
Mm-hmm.
to the term masculine, just like
Mm-hmm.
the term,
Yeah.
but also take offense to people saying men now are not masculine enough or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And we work in extremes. And so we're saying, okay, well, like, well, if you're saying men aren't masculine enough, you're saying that they're too feminine. And like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that men have feminine traits. I'm saying they're watered down,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like a bold picture is a clear picture. It is a
Mm-hmm.
crisp picture. You can see everything. But when it's watered down and it's copies of copies of copies of copies, and you
Mm-hmm.
start fading that out, and they get the lines through it, and you can't really tell what the details are, that's almost more. I've never thought of it that way,
Mm-hmm.
of just like, man, when we're saying this term masculine and talking about especially men in the church now, and what does it look like to be a masculine man of God?
Mm-hmm.
It's it's are you a copy of a copy of a copy that the first copy was watered down anyway?
Mm-hmm.
So what you're copied from has allowed you to be so watered down that you really don't know who you are, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the details are so fuzzy and it's so unclear who you are. And the world says masculine, point blank, bad, wrong, no, not
Mm-hmm.
good, not masculine, safe, good, healthy, all these things. And we're
Mm-hmm.
saying masculine, excellent, because
Mm-hmm.
masculine is clear.
Mm-hmm.
Masculine is bold. The same way feminine is clear and feminine is
Yeah.
bold. We're not talking about roles even really here. We're talking about identity. Like who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you in the image of Christ? Because the image of Christ is clear.
Mm-hmm.
That's not watered down. Who he is in scripture, what we learn, who we know him to be, that is it. That is clear. And if we're supposed to be like him and live lives that exemplify the life that Jesus called us to live, allowed us to live, that he taught the disciples and the 72 and whoever how to live, that was clear. He gave them clear commissioning, clear instructions,
Mm-hmm.
clear direction on how to live. And we have just watered it down so much
Mm-hmm.
that we don't know how to live or who we are in those lives.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, that was a really long sentence to get there, but I've never thought of it or heard of it put that way, of just
Mm.
masculine now is not more feminine necessarily. It's just watered down.
Yeah.
It's just watered down. We just don't know who we are. It's not clear.
Yeah. But I mean, and I do think that even though like it watered down, sometimes it does equate to feminine. Like, you know,
Sure.
and like it's so sad to see. I saw this video today of this dad walking up to a school board and just ripping them to shreds because they let they let a little boy go into the girls' bathroom when his 8-year-old daughter was in there, and he's like, this is not appropriate. Like this is not like you're not standing up for basic morals. You're not standing up for
Mm,
basic right and wrong. Like you're cowards because you're scared of the societal
mm,
pressures that don't even make sense. Like, no, I don't want to be that watered down man who just says, you know what? People can do what they want as long as it doesn't affect me. And that's how I used to be. But like,
mm.
it
Yeah.
always ends up affecting everyone, like these choices that society and men and women like
Mm,
of power have let people continue to make just because they wanted people to feel included, quote unquote, has become the slipperiest slopes now. Like it starts, and that's what everyone
yeah.
said in the beginning. It's like, oh, you start saying one thing, let one thing happen, it's a slippery slope, and everyone's like, oh no, it's not. And look where we are. Like, you know? And I used to be afraid to say things like this in public. Like this is going to air, but I don't care because it's not right. Like, you know?
Yeah. No,
So,
absolutely. And I think even just within the framework of what you're saying, it's so easy to get bent out of shape in this conversation because when we say, watered down masculinity is unclear and can be more feminine, people are like, well, what's wrong with a feminine
mm,
man? And I mean, like, understanding your emotions, that's great. That's
yeah,
that's not a feminine trait, even though we've
no,
attributed that to women,
yeah,
right?
right,
That's a human trait. We've just chosen
yeah,
whether or not we should or should not do those things. It's stuff like that that we say, man, that's not okay to say. And we say, well, why? Because of the traits we've assigned to one or the other.
mm,
And
mm,
so when we say it's watered down and you hear that as an insult, is it because the view that you have of feminine masculine is by definition watered down, unclear,
mm,
because the societal definition of these things has left it unclear? And so really our only recourse, our being the world, the only recourse is
mm,
outrage. Right? Like
yeah,
we can't have rational conversation anymore because outrage is the
mm,
language that is most universal now. If you don't know what you feel,
yeah.
you be outraged. If you don't know what to say, be
Just yell
outraged.
louder.
Because if you're loud, yeah, yeah, you'll be heard. You'll be heard. And no one's going to question what you're saying as long as you're loud. Hmm,
Yeah, because they just don't want to deal with
that's
it.
interesting.
It's like, oh, that person's crazy. I'm just gonna let them yell, and I'm just gonna stand over here in my box because they're not directly affecting me. You know, and I mean, I used to be that way. I used to be like, yeah, sure, like vote for all the human rights stuff and things like that. Like you can do what you want. Like just don't like force it on me or for whatever. Like, but they have like you
Hmm,
know, and it's everywhere. Like
yeah,
we don't want to send our kids to public schools now because the public school system's been indoctrinated with ridiculous things that are not biblical and not
mm,
things that we agree with. And on our kids are so impressionable. It's like I don't want my child to be just told these things that just aren't biblical truths, that aren't that are, that are toxic for them at that age. They're toxic for me now. I'm 29 years old. I don't need to hear all these things and see, like, no, like, and so
Yeah. No, I mean it's like so much of this comes back to unity, right? Unity of the
yeah.
church, unity of people, unity of
Hmm.
the flock, right? Jesus says, I'm the door and I'm the good shepherd. My flock is in
Yeah.
the sheep pen, but I have those who I have called who are not here yet, and I'm going to go get them and bring them back. That's all
Yeah.
just Jesus ease
Yeah.
for unity, right? So much about unity in Ephesians and more like that. But what I see over and over and over again is an attack on unity, right? You want to attack unity, attack identity.
Yeah.
You want to
Right.
attack identity, make it blurry. And
Yeah.
if identity is blurry, then we don't know who
Water it
we are in the
down.
Lord. And if we are not unified together, yeah, and unified with the Lord, then there is no unity in the church, in relationships, in families. And so, I mean, you want to see the attack that is so devastating to the world right now. It's the attack on unity. And
Hmm.
right now, the most successful attack is through identity.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's a real problem because
Yeah.
it's we stop at the identity question. And that is a real conversation, right? Like there is so many layers and depth to the conversation of who am I, and maybe question like 1B, who do I want to be? Right? That is
Yeah.
that is a genuine, actual, real, deep conversation that's been around forever, right? That's
Yeah.
that's not a now question. That is not new. But now we stop at that and we give so much weight and so much significance to that question. We never go
Hmm.
deeper and say, how is this ununifying? How is this
Yeah.
destroying and breaking, you know, stealing, killing, and destroying the unity of the body of believers? Because it is. We see it
Yeah.
over and over and over again what this is doing to the church, right? The big C church.
Hmm.
And it's working. It's successful.
Hmm.
And man, like I guess maybe that as like frustrating and saddening as that is, that also gives us, being the body, us the body, really, really clear directive and direction into,
Yeah.
all right, like what is our mission? What is our calling?
Hmm.
Unity.
Hmm.
Take it to the next step, the next level of depth. We want to talk about identity? Great. Learn how to do it in a way that's unifying.
Hmm.
You want to talk about issues that we disagree with? Awesome. Do it in a way that's unifying.
Hmm.
We don't have to skirt the truth. We don't have to give in to things that we know are wrong, but we can do that in a way that is not divisive, undercutting, and causes disunity.
Hmm.
And sometimes people are just going to go opposite ways,
Hmm.
right? Jesus doesn't say every sheep in this field is one that's going to be in my flock,
Hmm.
but he does say there are those that are not yet in this pen, that is not yet in this sheepfold. Now I'm going to go get them.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if we, the sheep that the good shepherd sends out and brings back, if we are going out and scattering the flock more, like what are we doing to the witness of Jesus, to the gospel of Jesus? Jesus said,
Yeah.
I'm going to go get them. And we say, cool, go further away,
Mm.
go further
Hmm.
because I, I want to be right. And man, that's a tough look at the church, but I think it's a real look at a lot of the church right now.
Oh, I mean, you were part of a church split, and like, I mean, at the church that we went to growing up, like, there was a massive split, and like, I mean, I believe there was a right side and a wrong side of that. There's a lot in the middle that I'm sure I don't understand, but from what I do, from what I know,
Yeah.
there's definitely a
Yeah.
side of it that I agree with. Um, but like, even Paul and Barnabas, yeah, right. Like, they had a disagreement and they split because they didn't want, like, they did not agree on the way forward, and so they both chose another person to do ministry with, and they went their separate ways. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, they were unified on the point that Jesus saves, that Jesus is Christ, that he is Savior, and they went and spread the gospel. And so, um,
Yeah.
like you said, there's certain things that we can split over, that we can talk about, we can debate about, but we need to be unified on the important things. And like, and there are some non-negotiables, and yeah, so
There certainly are. Well, and even, I mean, that might be,
yeah.
maybe that's the, you just said it. Such a great final word on that, man, or final, maybe this conversation of that. But when they split,
Mm-hmm.
they left and kept doing what their calling was. They left and
Yeah.
kept pursuing the mission. They were still pursuing the same goal and the same mission, right? Of,
Mm-hmm.
of, of bringing the name of Jesus to the world, despite splitting and despite
Mm-hmm.
choosing to go opposite directions. The mission remained. Oh my goodness, how powerful could it be for the church if we could split and say, you know what, I disagree, you disagree, let's
Mm-hmm.
continue with the mission. Instead of I
Yeah.
disagree, you disagree, we're going to split and I'm going to talk about you and you're going to talk about me for the next
Mm-hmm.
3 years. Man,
Yep.
how significant could the church be if we stopped living that way and started living the way you just said of, hey, we disagree, they're non-negotiables, but you and I, we have the same mission. So let's
Yep.
continue with that. Man,
Yeah.
that's good.
Amen. All right. I want to end by asking you, uh, I guess, like one of the first things we were talking about, your bold prayer. Like, what's your bold prayer, that your bold Lord bless me prayer?
All right. Man, I for growing up, a lot of my spiritual mentors were itinerant speakers, itinerant pastors, and
Mm-hmm.
missionaries. And for a very long time, I have felt that is a calling in my life at some point. I've never felt urgency
Mm-hmm.
for it, but I have felt the draw towards it. Um, I, for some reason, right now, feel this significant unrest in my preaching.
Mm-hmm.
I'm preaching the gospel. It's good, it's sound, it's solid.
Mm-hmm.
But so often when I get down or step off or whatever from a moment of presenting the gospel to whoever I am, like, man, I have like the itch isn't gone, right? Like I have more that I want to
Mm-hmm.
do and more that I want to say. And I, my bold prayer is the Lord starts giving me chances to preach for the purpose of revival.
Mm. Wow.
I feel like what the Lord has equipped me to do in my preaching style, but also in my love for speaking and
Mm-hmm.
for presenting the gospel to people, I feel like it's for revival. Like that is what I have a desperation for the revival of the church.
Yeah. Amen.
And thankfully, I haven't been in a position very often to need to revive the church, right? The church has
Mm-hmm.
been relatively alive, right? And so we're just
Mm-hmm.
like, cool, like let's go deeper and let's learn more. But the more and more I sit and think about like what is this itch in my spirit every single time I finish a message. Like what is
Mm-hmm.
that? It comes back to this point of like I want to be a part of the revival of the church. I want to be I don't want my name to be a part of it. I want my witness of the testimony of Jesus
Mm-hmm.
to be a part of the revival of the church that I genuinely believe is coming, that is
Yeah.
happening. I want to be a
Yeah.
part of that. And
Amen.
so my bold prayer is that the Lord starts giving me opportunities to genuinely preach towards and for the purpose of the revival of the church.
Wow. That's cool. I wanna see that. I wanna,
I'm excited.
yeah, I wanna hear about it. That's good. Very cool, man.
Yeah, me too.
I'll be praying for that.
Appreciate that. What about you? What's yours?
Mine's a little different vein. But my bold prayer, my Lord bless me prayer, is that by this time next year, I'd like to be a dad, and I'd like for for us to be in a place where Josie doesn't have to work. Like that's the blessing
Yeah.
that I want from the Lord, is
Mm,
that I want to be a father who is providing enough for my family that my wife can take care of our child as her job. Um,
mm,
so
mm. Well, man, I can't wait to celebrate that with you next year. If that's God's will, then
yeah,
17th of next year is going to be a big day of celebration.
that'd be cool.
Um, it's going to be pretty cool, man. Absolutely. That is such a faithful prayer, man.
Yeah.
Like that, I love that. I will, for certain, me and my family will be praying for you for that. Um, that's awesome, man. That's
They
such an awesome prayer. Yeah, that'd be so great.
would
That'd be
be.
so awesome.
And I asked that if that's not the Lord's will, that he would change my heart to be in
Yeah.
tune with his. And it has not changed. My heart has not changed. So um
Okay.
but we'll see, you know. Uh
So then we'll roll with it for now.
yeah, you know, we're gonna roll with it.
Yeah,
And you know
absolutely.
what's something else that dude, I think it'd be cool if I could figure out how to start speaking at certain things. Like just like as a side thing. That's something I wanted to do when I was younger, but life kind of changed and stuff, and so but it's
Well, hey
been
man, come
more
guest
of an
speak the
interest
week
for
that
me
you're down
recently.
here.
Well, that'd be
Do it.
something.
I'm serious. I,
Maybe
I'm
we can
I'm
talk more about
100%
it.
serious. The week, yeah, the week that you're down here, come guest speak. I'd love that.
Okay. All
Okay.
right, bro. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you.
I appreciate it, man. I always leave very full. This is I
Me too.
really look forward to this time with you, man. I really appreciate your perspective and insight on things.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to follow on whatever platform you're listening on and send it to a friend. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. They really help boost my exposure. If you're on YouTube, make sure that you're subscribed and liking every video. It really helps the algorithm. Links to all my and my guest socials, along with music credits, are in the show notes. Thanks so much. Love y'all. Bye.